this part, you will listen to 5 short recordings of monologues or dialogues and answer one question for each recording.
Part 1. Listen to 5 short tracks and answer the questions. You can listen twice, simply rewind.
Why is the person's mobile phone not working?
I'm having the worst of luck with my mobile phone. Last week, as I was cycling home whilst caught in a rainstorm, my mobile slipped out of my pocket and fell into a puddle. Not only was the screen totally shattered, but water had also seeped through. It cost me an arm and a leg to fix, but I can't be without my phone. Even when my battery dies, it makes me uneasy. So today, when I went to go pick up my phone, there was a citywide cellular outage. I couldn't make any calls or texts, and no one else could either.
Who did the person call for help?
I had left my final assignment to the last minute, as usual. My friend and I had been out all day, and I didn't anticipate that it would take too long to finish. I started working on it around 11 p.m. and began to have problems with my classroom's learning software. My sister, who attends the same school, was already asleep, so I couldn't ask her. I started to get nervous, and I wondered if there was an administrator I could call. There was, but they were only available during business hours. In the end, I learned my lesson about not leaving things till the last minute because I wasn't able to ask anyone for help.
What is the most important feature that the person is looking for?
House hunting is so stressful, especially when moving from an apartment to a larger home. I've gone to a few open houses, and some of the rooms are so big that I would never have enough furniture to fill them. I've noticed a fairly big price difference in homes with balconies, and I would be able to save some money without having one. This isn't a big issue for me, as I would rather have a backyard instead. Another budget-saving tip I learned is to go for homes with an older kitchen, because you can always renovate and buy new appliances down the line. What I am not compromising on, however, is storage space. I have a lot of clothes to put away.
What pet is the person considering adopting?
As a person who has only ever had dogs growing up, I love the idea of having one around. However, my apartment is so tiny that it would be cruel to raise a puppy here. My roommate suggested a cat, but I just can't wrap my head around that idea. Plus, my mom is allergic, so she wouldn't be able to visit. Instead, I've been reading up on turtles. I have a large tank for them from when I used to have an aquarium filled with fish. Though they live in water, they don't mind walking around from time to time. I think my small living space wouldn't overwhelm them.
What food made the speaker ill?
I had an awful case of food poisoning last night. While I am used to eating a variety of foods, I ate out at a new restaurant last night. It seemed a bit sketchy, but I'd heard a lot of people rave about their food. I wanted to order a beef burger, but they were sold out, so I ordered a chicken sandwich instead. It was served with cauliflower, which I hate, so I didn't even taste it. The sandwich seemed all right at first, but I have a strong feeling that the meat was undercooked. I came home and spent the whole night throwing up. All I can stomach today is some plain crackers.
Part 2. Listen to 3 monologues and answer the questions.
You'll hear part of a radio interview in which the comedian and writer Jane Clarkson is talking about her work. Choose the answer A, B, C, or D, which fits best according to what you hear. You now have 1 minute to look at part 2.
Today I'm with the much-loved comedian and writer Jane Clarkson. And obviously, Jane, this year has been quite a turning point for you.
Well, I'll never stop doing comedy, but there were practical reasons for wanting to take some time off and write a book. I felt my daughter had been neglected. She was just about to make the tricky transition from primary to secondary school, and I felt she needed her mum around. I seem to have spent most of her life in a van touring from venue to venue for my comedy act. And I did enjoy being at home for a bit, although I missed the applause and the laughter. When I finished writing in the evening, I'd turn the computer off and there'd be nothing, which was hard to get used to.
How was your novel received?
Well, a lot of male comedians had written books, so there was a bit of a bandwagon waiting to be jumped on, but with my impeccable timing, I jumped slightly late when everyone was starting to get heartily sick of comedians' books. Also, there's a kind of fury coming from some journalists about comics writing books. They're absolutely livid. As if they see your book in a bookshop and they jump up and down shouting, "It's not fair. Why should she make money out of writing as well as performing?"
Was it a difficult transition?
Well, if you think logically, writing is the obvious step. I've spent years trying to make people listen to my anecdotes, so that must count for something. Also, if you've been an observational comedian, which I am, it's not a great leap to use those skills you've developed, like observing odd mannerisms to use for jokes, and turn them into a book.
Listen to a woman talking about becoming a freelancer and answer the following questions.
I have been a self-employed graphic design artist for about a year now. As a child, I was always doodling in notebooks. By the time I graduated high school, I knew I wanted to turn my passion for creating into a career. I got an entry-level job at a graphic design firm, but it paid peanuts. I was struggling to make ends meet, and I didn't have any financial support from my loved ones. I had come across freelancing websites before, but I had also heard horror stories from some friends about never receiving their payments, so I never signed up. One day, my coworker asked me if I could help her out with her side gig. She was designing restaurant logos for a company, but needed a hand. That was my way to self-employment, and through that referral, I was able to build up my clientele. It got to a point where I was making more money with my own independent work than at my 9-to-5, so I decided to resign. My boss was taken aback with my decision as I had been doing such a great job. She was understandably upset, and I thought I would be too. However, I wasn't. I felt so reassured that I was making the best decision for me and my future.
Listen to a woman talking about home renovations and answer the following questions.
As a first-time homebuyer, I decided to cut costs by building an older home and investing in repairs to maximize its value. My realtor advised me that this would be a lot of money down the line, but I assured him that money was not an issue. I met with a few contractors to get an estimate on the project so that I could get a few opinions. As I am not on a tight deadline to move in, I wanted to be sure I found the right company to do the work. A lot of construction companies try to take advantage of women not knowing a thing or two about repairs, and I didn't want to get ripped off. I ended up choosing a fairly new company. It's run by 2 immigrants who have engineering degrees from their home country. I opted for them because I thought some of the more well-known contractors cost more than what they were worth. As long as the work was done efficiently, I'd be pleased. However, I was totally blown away. The degree of craftsmanship that these 2 young men put into the work was incredible. I'd highly recommend them if you need a renovation done.
Listen to a couple discussing gardening. Read the statements and decide whose opinion matches the best, the man's, the woman's, or both. You will only listen to part 3 once.
I am thrilled that we are finally moving into a home with a garden. I cannot wait to spend my afternoons planting seeds, watering them, and watching them grow.
Wow, you sound like my grandfather. All he ever did when he retired was garden. His friends, too. When they weren't actively tending to their gardens, they were talking about them. I've always thought of it as an activity for the elderly.
That's not true. You only think that way because you have never tried to grow your own plants before.
Well, that's because I know how difficult it is. I used to help my grandpa from time to time. It's not all leisure, you know. It's taxing on your body, the way you have to crouch down to dig. What's more is that the soil, mulch, and gardening equipment are so heavy.
Come on. You are exaggerating. It is not that difficult. Besides, isn't it worth it? Nothing quite compares to the taste of homegrown food. We can even have some basil, mint, and other herbs.
You're right. That is a positive factor for sure. Grandpa's tomatoes were much better than the supermarkets.
Yep, all right. So we will have tomatoes, garlic, and lettuce here, then our herb garden over there.
What about flowers?
What about them?
Well, they're pretty. I think they look much nicer than boring vegetables. Let's grow some of those instead.
Sorry, dear, but we can't live off tulips and daffodils. Flowers may look pretty, but if they are only annuals, they're a waste of money.
Well then, maybe I'll just visit a public garden and look at them there. Did you know that the city has an initiative that allows those who live in a building to rent gardening space? I think that is wonderful.
I agree. I think that everyone should have access to gardening plots. I even think gardening is a skill that kids should learn.
I see your point. But I think that children have far more important things to learn at school.
Part 4. Listen to a person telling a story about their co-workers. Then, choose one option for each of the 4 key elements. Take note. The answers do not appear in order of the table.
You will only listen to part 4 once.
At my job, I report to 2 individuals, my immediate supervisor, Jason, and the director of the company, Carrie. Both Jason and Carrie have decades of experience in the field of finance. They have worked in both banks and accounting firms for a long time, which make them really knowledgeable about the industry. Jason seems more on the ball about how this company in particular works, though. He can tell you all the policies without having to look them up, and he is the longest serving employee. In contrast, I had already been working here for 6 months before Carrie came on board, so she's fairly new to the team. She's even asked me questions about procedure despite being my boss. When she was hired, there was a rumor going around the office that she was hired as Jason's replacement. People were saying that Jason had been promoted to another branch or that he found a new position at a competitor. I thought it was true because I hadn't seen him for a week, but when he returned to work with a tan on Monday, I realized he had just been on vacation. Carrie and Jason have polar opposite personalities, so it surprises me how decisions get made around the office. Carrie's role requires her to manage stressful situations, which I think Jason struggles with. He isn't the most organized person. So when problems need to be solved, he takes his time ruffling through his papers and notes. Nonetheless, he is wonderful to his employees. Whenever we need something, he takes the time to listen to our difficulties and helps us out. His kind-hearted nature extends to personal issues outside of work, and he is readily available to listen. I'm sure Carrie is also a nice person in that regard, but as I don't know her well enough, she can come across as standoffish.
That's the end of the test. Please leave a thumbs up and subscribe.